Hello, I'm going to give you some pointers about buying a used classical nylon string guitar. Plenty of the problems that can arise with old guitars can be more trouble than the instrument's worth. So there'll be some things where I'll say walk away. Okay? And much of what I'm going to say applies to steel string acoustics as well, but we're going to be dealing with a nylon string guitar. If you're answering an advertisement, try to find out the model name and number. It may well be that it's far too old to find anything out about it, but you may be able to find out what its original price would have been, or to find out what a roughly equivalent model would be. And if you think of your rough rule of thumb as being 50%, if the instrument has had a relatively normal life in terms of wear and tear, you should be aiming to be paying roughly 50% of that new price. If it's had a hard time, you'd be paying less. If it's almost as new, you'd be paying more than half price. I would never go very close to the full value, because you might as well have the new instrument and the warranty and the pride of having your own brand new guitar. Other things to think about if you're going to be going along to visit somebody who's offering a guitar for sale. Firstly, try to find out if it's got all its strings on. Even so, though, I would actually take a spare set of strings, because it's quite possible that some will have broken or just worn out. And take a tuner as well, because usually an old guitar, especially if it's not been played for a long time, will be horribly out of tune. And you can't really tell what it'll sound like unless you get it not just in tune with itself, but at pretty well the right playing pitch. One of the things that's quite easy to appreciate about any acoustic instrument is it's a piece of carpentry, it's a piece of joinery. So if you look at all of the joins where two pieces of wood meet, just look around all of those, and if you see any gaps where the two pieces have come apart, that really is a walk away. Also look along the middle of the back and the middle of the front. Sometimes, because those are actually two pieces of wood jointed together, sometimes you can get a crack in the middle. And look carefully along the front to see that no cracks have developed in the middle part. Having looked all over the guitar to check all the joints have not opened in any way, I would next look at the bridge. In particular, just along this part here, because sometimes the bridge here can just lift just a little bit, and it's not at all obvious unless you look very, very closely along there. So make sure that the bridge is completely together with the front of the instrument. Also, look at the saddle. That's this white piece that runs along here with the strings underneath. It's not very obvious, but this one's actually broken there. That's not an insurmountable problem. It is possible to get another saddle. It's not a very expensive thing, but it's an example of the sort of thing that if you notice there's a problem, you might be able to argue for a better price. Also, check that the tie block, which the strings are tied around, check that it's not wearing on either side where the strings go. Sometimes on cheaper instruments the bridge is made of a softwood. It should really be made of a hardwood, and sometimes you can get problems because over time the strings being put on have worn quite a hole there, and that really is a case of walk away. Next, have a look at the neck and the frets. Firstly, if you just run your hand along either side of the fingerboard where the frets kind of come to the edge of the fingerboard, sometimes over time what happens is the frets sort of push out, and it is something that can be fixed, but it's actually quite an expensive, difficult thing. So if when you run your hand up and down like that, you can feel kind of sharp points sticking out, that probably is a case of walk away. I mean, these ones are just sticking out a little bit, and if I move my hand, you can probably just about hear the sound of my hand going by them. So they're not very good, but it's probably just about usable. Also, look along all the frets over the body as well. If they're a little bit coming out of their fret slot, that's not an enormous problem, because a light tap with a small hammer can quite often fix that. Obviously you don't have the strings in the way when you're using the hammer. Then have a think about the headstock. It's the headstock here. Various things could go wrong up here as well. First thing to check is that every single one of the tuners, that's these things, will turn very freely. Sometimes the gear which the tuner here turns in order to turn the roller, these can break or wear out or jam up. And especially the tuner for the 6th string, this one is quite prone to going, especially on cheaper instruments, because the 6th string is the one that in normal classical music you retune most often. The strings are attached to these white rollers, which are turned by the tuners, and on older guitars sometimes these rollers can become cracked, and that can make it pretty well impossible to tune your guitar. They can be replaced. You can take off the tuner. They're not a very expensive part. It's a bit of a fuss, but it's not at all impossible. The other thing to check while we are at this end is the nut. That's the small white part with the slots which the strings go over. Firstly, make sure again that it's not cracked or broken, and that it is in place properly. Like the saddle at the bridge end, this is a part that is reasonably possible to replace, but again, if there's a problem with it, then that's something that you can argue about to reduce the price. People very often worry about old guitars having a neck that has bent, and yes, that does happen, but in fact it's fairly rare. And it's very important to realise that the fingerboard is actually deliberately curved so that the height of the strings on the side of the thin strings is slightly less than the height of the strings on the side from the fat strings. So I don't know if you can see in this shot, but the fingerboard actually slightly curves away on that side, and it's actually meant to do that. This is though an example of a model of guitar where neck problems can occur, and the reason is that the design of the neck joint here, you notice here, there's nothing underneath that part there. And normally with the neck you get what's called the heel that comes down like this, and that gives basically a more reliable way of attaching the neck. So if you notice a guitar with this kind of part here, just look out especially for this issue with the neck. Also, look on the front of the instrument here in front of the bridge and here just behind. It's quite normal for this part to dish down a little bit and for this part to rise up a little bit, but that really should only be a little bit. And if you notice a big problem with the neck having pulled forward this way, then quite often you get extra problems there, and that really is a case of walk away, I'm afraid. It's really important with any instrument you're thinking about buying that you have the chance to play it at least a bit, and this is one of the reasons why you need to bring a tuner, because an instrument like this you just can't tell anything about it, and also that spare set of strings. You probably noticed the 4th string on this one is broken. There is a definite practical reason why you want to be able to play the instrument a bit, and that's to find out whether the notes it makes cause any buzzes. What can happen if you think the front of the instrument has got a lot of struts glued on the underneath face of it, and if they come loose over time because the glue has gone, then because they're on the inside of the instrument they can be really, really hard to get out and to fix. So if you're playing a particular note and you notice a pronounced buzz comes out of the instrument, then that is probably a walk away issue, to be honest, because it's such a hard thing to fix. But anyway, it's also important to play the instrument because in the end it's got to be making a sound that is agreeable, that's hopefully better than whatever you've started with if this is an upgraded instrument from your first guitar. So anyway, I hope that's given you some ideas and the confidence to go looking for second-hand guitars under your own steam.